I'm Natalie, 32 years old. After saving for 8 years, I finally bought my dream home in the Chicago suburbs. My parents often said they admired my independence, but my younger brother Jake seemed to drift through life on their financial help. Last Sunday at family dinner, Jake casually announced he was moving into my house. I kept my smile as I prepared to turn the tables. Before I explain what happened, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And give this video a like if you've ever had to stand your ground with family members who took you for granted. I grew up in suburban Chicago in what looked like a picture-perfect middle-class family. My dad was an accountant, my mom a second-grade teacher. We never lacked essentials, but luxuries had to be earned through chores and good grades, at least for me. Jake, 3 years younger, seemed to have his own set of rules. When I wanted something as a child, I saved my allowance for weeks. Jake would throw a tantrum and leave the store with a new toy. My parents said he was sensitive and needed extra care. That pattern continued into our teen years. Before college, I worked 2 jobs all summer to save for textbooks. Jake spent his summer gaming and hanging out with friends. When I started school, my parents helped me move in but made it clear my education was my responsibility. I took out loans and worked part-time all 4 years. 2 years later, Jake went to the same university on my parents' full support. He dropped out after 3 semesters, blaming bad professors and bad luck. They paid for him to attend community college, which he quit after a year. I graduated with a business degree and worked my way up in a real estate firm, saving diligently for a home. Jake jumped between jobs, bartending fired for giving friends free drinks, a cell phone store dismissed for inventory issues, and insurance sales quit before taking the licensing exam. He always had excuses and never admitted fault. Despite this, my parents kept helping him financially, covering rent, buying him a car, even paying off his credit cards twice. At 29, after 7 years of saving, I finally had enough for a down payment. The market was competitive, but my real estate experience helped. When I saw a charming 3-bedroom craftsman home with built-in bookshelves, hardwood floors, and a bright bay window, I knew it was the one. The price stretched my budget, and the mortgage approval process was stressful, especially as a single woman with every financial detail scrutinized. When I signed the papers and got the keys, I sat in my car and cried. This home was the result of years of sacrifice. At my housewarming, my parents seemed proud, giving me a gift card for home improvements. Jake arrived 3 hours late, empty, and spent the evening talking about his relationship troubles. His only comment about the house was to ask if he could host a party there since his apartment was too small. I declined, which led to a week of texts accusing me of being stuck up since becoming a homeowner. The next 2 years were peaceful. I painted, planted a garden, and slowly furnished the home with pieces I loved instead of secondhand leftovers. The mortgage payments were high, and unexpected repairs often strained my budget, but I managed. Having my own space, my personal sanctuary, was worth it. Meanwhile, Jake continued his pattern of instability. He moved in with a girlfriend, then returned to his apartment when they broke up 3 months later. He quit another job, claiming his boss didn't respect his creative vision for the marketing team. He borrowed money from our parents for a car repair, but spent it at a music festival. Every family gathering brought a new episode of Jake's drama, with my parents expressing concern but never insisting he change. Last month, Jake lost his latest job as an assistant manager at a sporting goods store. Something about inventory discrepancies. His version blamed a conspiracy of jealous coworkers. That same week, his landlord informed him his lease would not be renewed due to noise complaints and late rent. At 30, my brother was once again unemployed and facing possible homelessness. I learned of this from my mother, who called to lament how unfair life was to her baby boy. She ended the conversation with a vague comment about how family must stick together and how my generation should support each other more. I dismissed it as one of her usual platitudes, not realizing it was a warning sign. The first clue that something unusual was happening came when my parents called 3 separate times in a single week. Normally, they phoned on Sunday afternoons for our weekly catch-up, so the sudden increase raised a red flag. Each call hinted at family matters that needed discussion, but when I asked for details, they deflected, saying, "Better to talk in person, just some ideas to run by you." Meanwhile, Jake, after months of little contact, began asking about my internet provider, speed, and monthly cost. He followed up with questions about which bedroom had the best natural light and whether the neighbors would mind late night music. When I asked why, he replied vaguely with no reason, and a smiley emoji. My suspicion grew when he texted asking for the dimensions of my spare bedroom and whether it could fit a king-size bed. That room was my home office, where I worked many evenings and weekends. It had never housed a bed, and I had no plans to change that. Still, I dismissed his questions as typical Jake behavior, especially since work was unusually stressful. I had a demanding client searching for luxury properties in the Gold Coast. The potential commission was substantial, but her constantly changing requirements had me scrambling daily. My boss made it clear keeping her happy was a top priority. On top of that, my house developed a major plumbing issue. A small leak under the kitchen sink quickly escalated into a problem with the main water line. Repairing it would cost over $7,000, money I didn't have on hand. This came shortly after replacing the water heater and fixing electrical issues. My beloved craftsman home was proving to be a financial drain. My emergency fund was gone, and I faced putting the expense on my credit card, something I had sworn never to do after watching Jake fall into debt that way. I called my financial advisor, Sandra, who had once warned I might be stretching my budget too thin. She reviewed my finances and pointed out the obvious. Between the mortgage, repairs, and other expenses, I was sinking. She gently suggested selling. The market was strong, and I could walk away debt-free with a sizable down payment for something more manageable. Initially, the idea felt like failure. This house represented years of hard work, but as Sandra explained the numbers, I saw she was right. Being house poor was harming my financial stability and long-term plans. That night, I contacted Melissa, a colleague who specialized in local residential sales. She confirmed I could list the house well above my purchase price and likely get multiple offers. She even had clients who had just lost a bidding war on a similar home and were ready to buy. The next day, they toured my house while I was at work. By evening, they submitted an offer 5% above asking with one condition: closing within 30 days. In return, they'd let me rent back for an extra month while I found a new place. It was an emotional but clear decision. I accepted and signed the preliminary paperwork. The inspection was set for early next week, leaving me in an odd state of emotional limbo over the weekend. I attended our family's usual Sunday dinner with a major life change underway but chose not to bring it up yet. The sale of my house wasn't final, and I needed time to sort through my own thoughts before facing my family's reactions. The inspection passed with only minor issues, which I agreed to fix before closing. By Wednesday, all contingencies were lifted, and the sale was set to close the following Thursday, just a day before our next family gathering. By Sunday, I would walk into dinner with the deed transfer complete and a certified check from my equity in hand. My emotions were mixed: relief that my finances would improve, sadness over losing a home I'd cherished, pride in making a responsible choice, and disappointment that my dream hadn't lasted. Adding to that was my unease over Jake's odd questions and my parents' frequent calls about family matters. I decided to keep the sale private until it was done, not just to avoid bad luck, but because I wanted this decision to be mine alone, without influence or drama. I couldn't have guessed how my choice would clash with my family's hidden plans, or how this dinner would change our relationships. Our Sunday dinners at my parents' house had been a tradition since Jake and I were in high school. Even after moving out, we rarely missed them. Mom typically cooked something comforting that took hours to prepare, while Dad would open a special bottle of wine. There was a familiar rhythm to these evenings. That Sunday, I arrived exactly at 5 o'clock. As always, the smell of pot roast and garlic mashed potatoes met me at the door. The dining table was set with our best china, which was unusual, and a bottle of champagne rested in an ice bucket, a break from our usual wine. "There she is," my dad called from the living room, muting the pre-game show. He stood, hugged me, and patted my back with more enthusiasm than usual. Right on time, our reliable Natalie, Mom, came from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sweetheart, you look tired. Work keeping you busy?" She hugged me and studied my face. "You've got dark circles. You're working too hard." "Just a demanding client and some house issues," I replied vaguely. "But dinner smells amazing. Can I help?" "No, everything's under control. Jake should be here any minute," she said, exchanging a glance with Dad that I pretended not to see. "Why don't you sit and relax?" Your father's opened some wine. I accepted a glass of Cabernet and sat on the sofa, making small talk about the warm weather and Mom's patio garden. But the conversation felt forced. My parents kept checking the clock and glancing at the window. At 5:20, the door opened and Jake strolled in as though he wasn't late. Sorry I'm late, he said without sounding apologetic. Traffic was rough, given he lived only 15 minutes away, and rarely apologized at all. His words felt oddly formal. But what caught my eye more was his appearance. He'd traded his usual shaggy haircut for something neat, wore a button-down shirt tucked into khakis instead of jeans and a t-shirt, and carried a gift bag along with a wine bottle wrapped in tissue paper. Jake, you look nice, Mom said, accepting his gift. And you brought wine, how thoughtful. Just wanted to contribute to the celebration, he replied with a wink that made me uneasy. Whatever this was, I was clearly the only one not informed at the dining table. The changes continued. Jake sat at the head of the table, Dad's usual spot, while Dad moved to the foot. Mom and I sat along the sides, as we served ourselves pot roast, potatoes, and green beans. The conversation remained stiff. So, Natalie, Mom began after a few minutes, that big, beautiful house of yours must feel pretty empty with just you in it. All that space going unused. I took my time chewing before answering. It's the right size for me. One room is my office, another for storage and guests. But you must get lonely, she pressed. It's such a big place for one person. Dad spoke before I could respond. Family should stick together in tough times. That's what I always say. We need to support each other, especially with the economy right now. Jake nodded in agreement, as if Dad had offered deep wisdom rather than a lead-in to some announcement. Absolutely family first. The meal continued in this vein, with more pointed remarks about my house and the importance of family unity. I noticed subtle remarks about Jake's recent streak of bad luck and saw him checking his phone repeatedly, as if waiting for a set time. My parents exchanged glances filled with anticipation. The champagne and ice bucket remained untouched, clearly reserved for something specific, as Mom served her homemade apple pie. Jake stood, cleared his throat, and reached for the champagne. I think it's time we share the good news, he said, starting to remove the foil from the bottle. What good news? I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. The cork popped with a sound that felt oddly out of place given the tension in the room. Jake poured champagne into 4 glasses that my mother had clearly prepared in advance. Well, as you know, I've had some setbacks lately, Jake began, speaking as though he was about to reveal a personal achievement rather than ask for help. My landlord is being unreasonable about the lease, and the job market is tough for someone with my qualifications. I took a small sip, waiting for the real point. But every cloud has a silver lining, he continued, raising his glass. Mom, Dad, and I have been talking, and we've come up with the perfect solution, a win-win situation. He paused, clearly enjoying the attention. To new living arrangements, he announced. Starting next Saturday, I'll be moving into Natalie's house just until I'm back on my feet. The silence that followed felt much longer than it was. My parents looked at him proudly, then turned to me, expecting approval. Jake's face carried an air of entitlement, as if he had solved everyone's problem. Mom and Dad said the spare bedroom would be perfect, Jake added when I didn't respond right away. Since you're rarely home because of work, you won't even notice me. I can help with utilities and maybe mow the lawn sometimes. My mother nodded. We thought it was the perfect solution. Jake needs a stable place to live while he job hunts, and you have all that extra space. Plus, you wouldn't be alone in that big house, my father chimed in. It's not safe for a young woman to live alone these days. I looked around, at the 3 faces, people who had made arrangements involving my home without asking me. They had decided what was best for me, and now expected gratitude. The anxiety I'd been feeling about telling them I sold the house vanished, replaced by certainty that I'd made the right choice. That's an interesting plan, I said evenly. There's just one problem. What's that, honey? My mother asked, her smile weakening. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila envelope holding the closing documents I'd signed the day before. I sold my house last week. The new owners take possession in 30 days. The silence was heavy. My mother's hand went to her throat. My father's brows knit together, and Jake's mouth hung open mid-sip. You're joking, right? Jake asked with a nervous laugh. This is some kind of prank. I set the documents on the table. The inspection was completed Tuesday, Contingencies cleared Wednesday, and we closed yesterday. The buyers are a nice couple with a 5-year-old daughter, excited about the backyard swing set. My father picked up the papers, adjusting his glasses. His expression darkened as he realized it was true. Natalie, why would you do this without talking to us? This is a major decision. The way you all decided Jake would move into my house without telling me, I replied. That's completely different, my mother said quickly. We were trying to help both of you by offering my home without asking me. How is that helping me? I asked. Jake grabbed the papers from my father and scanned them. You did this on purpose, he said. You heard I needed a place and sold your house to spite me. Not everything is about you, Jake. I sold it because it was becoming a financial burden. The plumbing repairs alone would cost $7,000, and I don't have that money and, like you, I don't have parents who cover my crises. That's unfair, my father said. We've always supported both of you equally. I laughed bitterly. Equally. I worked 2 jobs to pay for college, while you gave Jake a free ride. I saved 4 years to buy my house while you paid his rent whenever he came up short. You bought him a car, but when my transmission failed, I was told to take the bus. My mother defended him, tears welling in her eyes. He needs more support. And whose fault is that? I challenged. You've enabled his poor choices for so long that he's never had to face consequences or grow up. Jake pushed his chair back from the table, the legs scraping against the hardwood. I don't have to listen to this self-righteous nonsense. You've always thought you were better than me. Natalie Miss Perfect with her real estate career and her house in the nice neighborhood. I don't think I'm better than you, I replied quietly. I just made different choices and worked hard for what I have, or had, I corrected, the loss of my home sinking in again. Well, your choices have screwed me over, Jake shot back. I already gave notice at my apartment. I have to be out by the end of the month, and now I've got nowhere to go. My mother gasped. Jake, you already gave notice. We told you to wait until after we spoke with Natalie. Jake looked slightly embarrassed. I was just being proactive. The landlord was hassling me about noise complaints, and I figured why pay rent for another month when I could move in with Nat. You assumed I'd just let you move in without asking, I said, realizing the depth of his entitlement. You made a major decision based on access to my home without even speaking to me, because you would have said no, Jake yelled. You've always been selfish. Enough. My father's rare raised voice silenced the room. This is getting us nowhere. Natalie, is there any way you can back out of the sale? If you explain the situation, maybe the buyers would understand. I stared at him in disbelief. Are you seriously asking me to cancel a legal contract, risk getting sued, and lose my earnest money just so Jake can have a free place to stay when I've already told you I'm selling for financial reasons? We could help with the plumbing costs, my mother offered quickly. Maybe chip in for utilities while Jake's with you. The sale is final, I said firmly. Even if it wasn't, I wouldn't cancel it for this reason. Jake is 30 years old. He needs to solve his own housing problem. Jake shoved his chair back again and stood. Thanks for the support, sis. Really feeling the family love here. He stormed toward the front door. Jake, wait, my mother called, rising to follow him. Let him go. Mom, I said tiredly, he needs to cool off. The door slammed, rattling the china cabinet. My mother sat back down, tears streaming. How could you do this to your brother? He's going to be homeless. He's not going to be homeless, I replied. He has options: a roommate, a studio, or staying with you and Dad temporarily. My father cleared his throat at that. Well, we'd offer, of course, but your mother converted his old room into her craft space, and we donated the furniture. You still have the guest room, I pointed out. That's more of a storage space now, my mother said quickly. Besides, Jake needs his independence. Just not enough independence to find his own housing, I said dryly. My father sighed. Natalie, please understand, we're just trying to help Jake get on his feet. You've always been so capable, so independent. He struggles in ways you never did. That's because you never let him develop those skills, I replied. Every time he faces consequences, you step in. How will he ever learn? We're his parents, my mother said, defensively. That's what parents do. No, Mom, that's what enablers do, I said gently. Real love means preparing your kids for the real world, not protecting them from it forever. The conversation went in circles, guilt trips about family loyalty, mixed with more suggestions for how I could still accommodate Jake despite selling my home. Could he stay in my new place? Could I help pay his rent until he got a job? Could I lend him money from the sale? It became clear that, to them, my resources would always be a safety net for Jack, not my own financial security. After an exhausting hour, I grabbed my purse and the closing documents. I need to go. I've got an early showing tomorrow and need to keep packing. Natalie, please, my mother began. I raised a hand. I love you both, but I can't keep having this same conversation. Jake is an adult. His housing is not my responsibility. I hope you'll help him find a realistic solution, but I need to focus on my own transition. My father walked me to the door in silence. As I turned to leave, he surprised me with a tight hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered. Even when I don't understand your decisions. It was a small acknowledgement, but it meant everything. Fighting tears, I drove back to my soon-to-be former home, the weight of the evening heavy on my shoulders. In the days after that disastrous dinner, my phone became a battlefield, calls and surprise visits from family. Jake led the charge with angry messages that shifted from, I can't believe you'd do this to me, to long explanations of how I'd ruined his life. He claimed his whole future had been planned around moving into my house, something I'd never agreed to. I already told everyone I was moving to your neighborhood. One message read, now I look like an idiot because my own sister would rather sell her house than help me. I resisted sarcasm and kept my replies short and factual. I sold my house for financial reasons. Your living situation is separate from my decision. My parents took a different approach, treating it like a negotiation. What if we help with the down payment on your new place? My mother suggested. Something with an extra bedroom for Jake just for 6 months. Mom, that's not the solution, I explained again. I'm downsizing to reduce my financial stress. Adding Jake would do the opposite. Even extended relatives joined in. My Aunt Susan called to say she was disappointed in my lack of family values. My cousin Patrick emailed a story about letting his brother live with him for a year, and how it strengthened their bond, ignoring that those arrangements had been mutual, not forced. Through all the pressure, I stayed focused on preparing for my move. The buyers had agreed to let me rent back the house for 30 days after closing, giving me a month to transition. After selling the house, I opened a high-yield savings account with the certified check, giving me a financial cushion I'd never had before. Working with a new colleague from my real estate firm, I toured apartments and small condos in more affordable neighborhoods. After years of stretching my budget to maintain the dream home, the idea of a simpler lifestyle felt surprisingly refreshing. A small, modern condo with no maintenance responsibilities and far lower monthly costs promised a new kind of freedom. One afternoon, while signing the lease on a charming one-bedroom in a converted warehouse, my phone buzzed. It was Jake. We need to talk. Coming over after work. I considered telling him not to, but decided it was better to have this conversation in person rather than through more heated texts. When I arrived home, Jake's car was already in the driveway. He sat on the front steps, waiting. Nice of you to let me know, I said as I unlocked the door, gesturing for him to come inside. The living room was half-packed, labeled, boxers lined the walls, and artwork was gone, leaving pale outlines on the walls. Jake looked around, frowning, the reality of my move sinking in. So, you're really doing this? He said, not a question, more an accusation. The house is already sold, Jake. The new owners take possession in 24 days. I set my purse down. What did you want to talk about? He ran a hand through his hair, looking uneasy. Mom and Dad said I should apologize for dinner the other night. So, sorry, I guess. The apology was thin, but I let it pass. Is that all? No, he admitted, sitting on the sofa without asking. I'm in a bind. My landlord's being impossible about noise complaints, totally exaggerated, by the way, and he's not renewing my lease. I have to be out by the end of the month. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change my situation, I said. I'm moving into a one-bedroom that barely fits my own furniture, let alone a roommate. What about a loan? Jake leaned forward. Just enough for first and last month's rent, plus a security deposit. I'll pay you back as soon as I get a new job. It was a familiar cycle. Jake in trouble. The family expected to step in, repayment promises that never materialized. For a moment, I considered it. I had the money now, but I remembered every loan that turned into a gift, every promise that faded once the crisis passed. No, Jake, I said firmly. You've had plenty of chances to save. You choose to spend everything right away. Must be nice to be perfect. he snapped. Some of us just have bad luck. This isn't about luck, I replied, my patience thinning. It's about choices. You violated your lease. You spent on concerts and trips instead of saving for emergencies. Now you're dealing with the consequences. So you're just going to let me be homeless? Your own brother. You have other options, I said. Ask a friend to let you stay, rent a room in a shared house, stay with mom and dad temporarily. None of those are real options, he shot back. Friends have tiny places, roommates are for college kids, and mom and dad's house is in the middle of nowhere. I laughed softly. 30 minutes from downtown Chicago is hardly nowhere. The truth is, those options require You don't want that. You've changed, he accused, grabbing his jacket. Ever since you bought this place, you think you're better than us. I haven't changed, I said quietly. I've just stopped apologizing for having boundaries. Maybe it's time you changed. Whatever helps you sleep at night, he muttered, slamming the door. I sank onto the sofa, exhausted but resolute. For the first time, I'd refused to be pulled into his chaos. It felt painful, but also freeing, like lancing a long festering wound. The next morning, my father texted, Jake will stay with us until he finds a place. Can you help clear storage for him? It was a small but meaningful victory. My parents were stepping up without pushing the burden on me. I decided I needed space from the family to focus on my move. I sent a group text. I'd be available for emergencies, but needed a few weeks for myself. My mother expressed hurt, my father understood, and Jake didn't respond. Moving day came quickly. The movers arrived at 8 a.m., and one by one, the pieces of my life in that house were carried out. The bay window where I read on Sundays, the dining table for dinner parties, the antique desk where I'd worked late nights all loaded into the truck. I walked through the empty rooms one last time, remembering moments both good and bad. The young couple buying the house was already imagining where their daughter's toys would go, and their excitement was contagious. My new apartment was modern, low maintenance and bright, though smaller and noisier than I was used to. But the financial relief was immediate. No more mortgage or constant repairs. My expenses dropped, debts were cleared, and I had a real emergency fund. Meanwhile, my parents were learning what I already knew about living with Jake. My mother complained about his late nights and dirty dishes, but I stayed quiet. This was their lesson to learn. A month later, my father called with unexpected news. Jake had a job interview with a downtown marketing firm. My mother had set house rules: rent due on the first, weekly chores, and a weekday curfew. Jake resisted, but when both parents stood firm, he adapted. They even charged him rent, secretly saving it for his future deposit. 2 weeks later, at Sunday dinner, Jake, dressed in business casual, and announced he'd gotten the job. It's entry level, but there's room to grow, he said. It wasn't an apology, but it was a step toward change. Later, my mother hugged me. We haven't been fair to either of you. We expected too little of Jake and too much of you, but we're learning. Over time, Jake found his own place near his job, and a new family dynamic began to take shape. One built on clearer boundaries and mutual responsibility. It wasn't large or luxurious, but it was his earned through his own effort. At his modest housewarming, I brought a plant and a grocery store gift card. Thanks for coming, he said awkwardly as I left. I know things have been weird between us. Family is complicated, I replied with a smile. But we're figuring it out. For what it's worth, he added, hands in his pockets. I get now why you valued your home and independence. I shouldn't have expected you to give up what you worked for just because I made poor choices. It wasn't a grand apology, but from Jake, it was real progress. I appreciate that, I said. And I'm proud of what you're building, he added. As summer turned to fall, I settled into my new life. My apartment had become home decorated, with favorite pieces from my old house, and a few items that fit its urban industrial style. My finances had stabilized, letting me focus on career growth instead of just paying bills. The money from selling my house was invested wisely, and I began casually looking at properties again, with a more realistic mindset. The dream home had taught me the difference between wants and needs, status and security. When I bought again, it would be with clear priorities. My family relationships were also shifting. Seeing Jake's progress, my parents began to understand how their enabling had harmed him. They still supported us, but in ways that respected our independence. Jake and I weren't suddenly close, but we'd replaced resentment and entitlement with mutual respect. One evening, I got a text from Jake. Got my first performance bonus today. Taking myself out to celebrate. Never thought I'd say this, but thanks for not letting me move in. I needed the push. I smiled. The road here had been painful but necessary. Sometimes the hardest decisions bring the most important growth. 6 months after selling my dream house, I stood in a modest 2-bedroom townhouse just outside the city. Sunlight streamed into a small, private patio garden. It was smaller than my old house but far more practical, modern, low maintenance, and within my budget. What do you think? My realtor asked. I think this might be the one, I replied, picturing my furniture inside. This time, the decision was based on practicality, not emotion. My down payment kept my mortgage manageable, and the rest of the house sale proceeds stayed invested. That financial security changed more than my living situation. It improved my sleep, work satisfaction, and even rekindled hobbies and friendships I'd neglected when I was house poor. Family tensions had eased. Jake, forced to handle his own housing, had found an affordable place, committed to his marketing job, and started an emergency fund. Your brother asked me about retirement accounts, my father said in disbelief. My parents had also learned to set boundaries, realizing that protecting Jake had actually kept him from growing up. The biggest change, though, was in me. Selling the dream house had first felt like failure, but in hindsight, it was one of my wisest choices. I'd learned to value experiences and relationships over status symbols, weekend trips with friends, cooking classes, and family vacations that created lasting memories. Boundaries had improved our relationships. My parents no longer expected me to fix Jake's problems, and Jake no longer felt entitled to my resources. Last month, Jake even repaid a small loan for car repairs, something unthinkable a year earlier. Signing the papers for my new townhouse, I reflected on the lessons learned. Real support encourages independence, not dependence. Material possessions can't replace peace of mind. And boundaries, though uncomfortable, lead to healthier connections. After closing, I texted my family, just signed on my new place, smaller, smarter, affordable, housewarming next month. Jake, bring that spinach dip you made last Thanksgiving. Jake replied almost instantly. Only if you promise not to sell this place next time. I need a favor. The joke made me laugh, a sign of how far we'd come. That evening, watching the sunset from my balcony, I felt a contentment my dream house never gave me. True security came not from impressive possessions, but from wise choices, healthy boundaries, and authentic relationships. The journey had been hard, but it was worth every step. Losing my dream house had given me something more valuably grounded, fulfilling life built on reality, not appearances. Have you ever made a tough decision others didn't understand, but that proved right in the end? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated, like and subscribe for more real-life stories about boundaries and finding your path. Share this video with anyone facing family pressure or financial stress. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices bring the most meaningful growth.